Bankers Hotrod.
Yeah, the Bankers Hotrod, that's what it was. And you had to be a banker to have one of these. Welcome to the episode of Jay Leno's Garage. The car we're featuring today, my 1961 Chrysler 300G. This is a car you've been commenting on for a while. It's been in the background of all the shots that we do of all the cars. And people go, hey, how am I doing a story on that Chrysler back there? I wanted to wait until I got a little fixed up, had a bad exhaust leak in it. We put a stainless steel exhaust system in it. Did a few other things to it, but other than that is almost exactly as it left the factory. As we always think of muscle cars as being those intermediate-sized cars built between 1964 and maybe 1971, the GTOs, the 442s. But before those cars came along, there were real muscle cars. They were a little bit bigger, they were full-size cars, and this was the one that was sort of the leader of the pack, the Chrysler letter cars. Whatever car you're interested in, there is a guy who is an expert on that car. The Chrysler Club is pretty fanatical. They not only have a Chrysler letter car club, this like an individual club for each letter. And Bob Jasinski is the expert on the 1961 Chrysler 300G, because he's got one. Bob, come on in here. You know, these guys are invaluable. You know, if you're looking to buy a collector car, I always recommend join the club, tell the club the car you're interested in, and they'll say, oh, Larry or Mike. There's always some guy who knows more about that vehicle at the expense of everything else. Their kids haven't spoken to them in years. The wife left 10 years ago, but God bless them, they know these automobiles, right? That's correct.
Absolutely.
But your wife's still speaking to you, right?
She does,
yeah. So there you go. So this is not really that bad. These are sort of forgotten cars. People don't, when they think of muscle cars, they do think of the intermediates in the mid-60s, but this was 375 horsepower, 495 foot-pounds of torque in 1961.
Well, I think the reason they forget about them, Jay, is because they were built in such limited numbers.
Yeah.
There were so few of them. This particular car of yours, there's only 1,280 built, and there was 337 convertibles, so that's really a very small amount.
And it was expensive. This was almost $6,000. Right?
Yeah, that's right, yeah. Around $5,800 to $6,000, depending on how it was equipped. And yours is pretty well equipped, so it's probably over $6,000.
And when you think about that, that doesn't sound like a lot of money today, but a Rolls Royce was $10,000 or $11,000.
Yeah.
I remember when I worked for Rolls Royce in Boston in 1971, the Corniche convertible, top of the line, was $29,500. But my parents only paid $19,000 for our house. So, I mean, that shows you in perspective. But these were really, they were just so futuristic. I love the styling on these. You had 4 individual bucket seats. Nobody had that. Right. You had the, what do they call it? I call it neon dashboard, but it's not. Is it luminescent?
It's technically panelescent lighting.
What is that?
In the Astrodome instrument cluster. We got to get the terms right.
The Astrodome
contains the panelescent lighting, and the panelescent lighting carries over to the tachometer that's built into the console of the car, as well as the radio dial and the clock as well. And it's really electroluminescent lighting. It's electrically a capacitor, and there's a little box about, right here underneath the dash. Right. About the size of a deck of cards, a power pack, and it converts the 12-volt DC to 200 volts AC at 250 hertz to get the electroluminescent panelescent lighting to work.
And it looks like a jukebox at night.
Yeah. The soft glow was sold as the benefit to electroluminescent lighting.
And you know, to me, Chrysler, especially in the 50s and 60s, was always the engineering company.
Yes.
You know, they always had the biggest and the fastest. I mean, the legend, the Hemi, of course, 1955. The 55 Chrysler was the most powerful car since the Duesenberg of 1928, the most powerful engine.
Yeah, the 1955 300 was the first production car that had 300 horsepower. As you mentioned, the only thing would be limited production, limited build, custom built cars like Duesenberg prior to that.
And Chrysler was the first one to have an automatic transmission that could not only take the power of a big motor, but could also shift faster than you could shift by hand.
Well, GM was the first with the automatic with the Hydra guide, but the cast iron torque flight was the first considered to be a very good automatic transmission that stood up very well.
Oh, yeah, these could take a heck of a beating.
They did.
Things, yeah. I remember guys when I was bring their father's car, they'd floor it and then press the button to drive. would just tear up the bias ply tires, and oh, hilarious! Yeah, yeah. Now the stylist was
Virgil Exner.
Virgil Exner, of course.
Yes, this is one of the last cars that Virgil Exner had a hand in designing, and he was the father of the $100 million look.
Right, right.
And the $100 million look was essentially what Chrysler spent to develop the new look. Chrysler, as a company, was always known for their engineering. And the cars after World War II, while they were very desirable cars, very dependable, K.T. Keller, the president of Chrysler, believed that when you get in your car, you should be able to wear your hat.
Yeah, he didn't want any car you couldn't drive while wearing a hat.
While wearing a hat, that's right.
If Lincoln couldn't drive your car, the roof was too low.
The roof was too low.
Yeah, yeah.
But he noticed once the flurry of activity of buying cars after World War II began to dim down, and it got to be 1949, 1950. We've got V8s and Cadillacs and Oldsmobiles at this point. Chrysler had to do something to really show themselves as moving into the future in a manner that would be consistent not only with style but with power. So they did both.
Right.
He did two things. He hired Virgil Exner in, I think, 1951, and he's a designer that worked with Studebaker and a couple of other makes prior to that. And he is the father of the design of the car. However, he's not the father of the engineering for the car. That would be a gentleman named Bob Roger. Yes.
And he was a real engineer's engineer, wasn't he?
You got it. He was. Bob Roger worked with the concept of the hemispherical combustion chamber into the Hemi engine after it was adopted. Chrysler was commissioned by the government to develop hemispherical combustion chamber engine for propeller aircraft. And they actually built one. The first hemispherical combustion engine they built was under contract with the federal government. But the war ended, and the plane was not built, but the engine was a success. It was actually two 8-cylinder engines end to end. Okay. And they drove the propeller off of a shaft in the center. It was very involved. But they learned a lot from how to build hemispherical combustion chamber engines from that, and they started development right after the war of an automobile engine for the car. And in 1951, they came out with the Firepower 331, which is what they called it. And the hemispherical combustion chamber provided better breathing with the spark plug in the center between the two valves. It allowed for larger valves and a crossflow that yielded more power than a conventional wedge head engine would. And they realized it in the 1951 cars. People were very happy with them. Chrysler was getting a name for themselves with the Hemi engine. In fact, Briggs Cunningham.
Right, sure. I've got a Cunningham that has the 331.
That has the 331, right. So Chrysler took notice of the fact that their engine was gaining popularity with other manufacturers, and Bob Roger had a suggestion that they build a car that would truly reflect the prowess, if you will, handle the power, and be a true gentleman's sports car.
Right.
And that's what the first 300 was built to accomplish.
They used to call these the Bankers Hotrod.
The Bankers Hotrod, absolutely,
that
right.
was the idea. But the Hemi engine was expensive to produce, wasn't it?
Yes, it was, because it had double rocker arms instead of single.
A lot more machine work.
It's also heavier, too.
Yeah.
Although there was a Cadillac 331 and a Hemi 331 Chrysler, and both engines weighed about the same.
Right.
But the heads were much heavier on the Hemi engine.
But this has the 413. I think 1958, was that the last year for the Hemi?
Yes, there were some Imperials in '59 that still had the Hemi,
right.
But that was the very last year, and it was only in the Imperial.
You know, it is so over the top that it's attractive. I think back in the day, I didn't appreciate it. You know, I look at it now and I go, if you tried to draw this, your version would look awful. It would just look out of proportion. It just would,
that's the genius of Virgil Exner.
Virgil Exner.
A beautiful brute is what they're called.
Yeah.
So I'm going to quote something from Tom McCahill.
Yeah.
The first 300 he drove in 1955. He said it was solid as Grant's tomb, but went 130 times faster.
Right, that's funny. Yeah, I remember all the ads for the period, and very sexist. A man's car, you know.
Absolutely.
Only a man can handle a car like it. You know, all that kind of stuff. You know, I did a woman driving this. How ridiculous! You know, you couldn't get away with that.
No, this is a man's car through and through.
That was it. Yeah. Well, here are some of the period ads. It just give you a taste of what it was like. It's pretty cool.
We'll say, though, the swing-out seats would lend themselves to...
yeah, that is the coolest thing. Let's show everybody how that works. So you open the door here, or you turn this. No chance of doing a Britney Spears here. You sit down, and you are in the car. Now, the early Chryslers, when this first came out, the chair opened automatically. When the door opened, the chair opened. It turned, rather. The chair turned. Trouble was, if you're driving down the street and you go, oh, my door's open, let me shut, ah! And then it'd throw you out in the street, and that wouldn't be good at all. But you can control the mirror from inside.
Yes.
Which was unbelievable.
Yes.
Nobody had that back in the day.
Yeah, and it's got a little connection there.
But the pièce de résistance is under the hood. You got to take
That's
a look.
right.
Yeah, yeah. These intake runners are unbelievable. Let's show them what we got here. I think one of the greatest next to the Hemi, one of the greatest looking engines. And these are aluminum, aren't they?
They are aluminum, yeah. They're a 30-inch runner. Internal combustion engine, when the piston comes down, it pulls in a fuel charge of fuel and air mixture. And typically, it's pulled through a short distance from the carburetor directly into the cylinder. So the concept here is that if we take that fuel charge, air and fuel mixture, and we pull it through a long fixed tube, it'll develop inertia, the column of fuel there, it'll develop inertia as it on its way down to the cylinder. So as the piston gets to the bottom of its travel and the valve, the intake valve closes, the effect of the moving column of air tends to compress more into the cylinder. It's like free turbocharging, or free supercharging, I should say. Another analogy that's used, if you draw on a soda straw and you stop the flow of drink with the tip of your tongue, you feel that the drink still wants to come in your mouth. So it's a moving column of liquid. In that case, it does the same thing. What it does is yield about a 10, although some say, Bob Roger actually said 15% in the advertising of the day. The more current standards say it's 10% increase in horsepower in the commonly used RPM ranges of about 1,200 to about 2,800.
Now, initially, when the 413 engine was introduced, a lot of guys back in the day poo-pooed it because it wasn't the Hemi.
That's correct, yeah. The hemispherical combustion chamber was very popular, but by 1958, the bean counters at Chrysler were saying this engine's too expensive to build. We need
and by too expensive, you're talking $10 or $15 an engine more, right?
I really don't know how much more it was, but they felt that it wasn't necessary for them to maintain market share by continuing to build a Hemi. And by that time, too, combustion head design had evolved, too, where there were alternatives to the Hemi design. Although it has come back too, so it still does retain its
But the Hemi was finicky, wasn't it? Your power was really at the top end where it could really breathe.
Well, they do well, but it is a well-breathing engine.
Yeah, but I mean, mid-range RPM, it was no different. It really wasn't until you put your foot in it that like when you look at the 440 and the Hemi, they're about the same on the street.
Yes.
But when you open them up for racing and breathing, then the Hemi really pulls ahead.
And that's exactly why the Hemis are used for drag racing.
Right.
It was the choice of the drag racers for that reason.
Now, the last year of the Hemi was how many horsepower?
Well, it was 392 cubic inch,
and
then there was various versions of it. So I couldn't really quote what the horsepower was.
But this had more horsepower, I think, than the Hemi, than the last Hemi.
Yes, this one does, I believe, and again, it depends on which particular version of this, too. There's a 400 horsepower version and then 375.
Right. But most of the 375 horsepower, there's only a few of the 400 horsepower.
There's, very few. There were 5 built, according to records, and I know of 1 that's left in existence.
Wow, okay.
And those cars were in 1960 and 61. They both won the Flying Mile in Daytona.
Yeah.
In fact, in 1960, it was the top 6 cars were all 300Fs, the predecessor with the 400 horsepower engine. And in 1961, the top 4 cars were Chrysler 300Gs with the 400 horsepower option. And you'll like this one, Jay. Of those top 4 cars, the number 1 car was the 300G. However, car 2, 3, and 4 were disqualified because chrome molding had popped off the windshield header of the cars, and they were disqualified because the car had to get the end of the race exactly the way it started.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So the speed of the car, the speed of the car exceeded the design of the attachment clips for the molding on the windshield.
And these handle with the torsion bar suspension, correct?
Yeah, they handle quite well.
Yeah, I mean, they really handle much better than when you think of the early Chryslers of the late 40s, the fluid drive and that boaty feeling, whereas these, you still had what they call the boulevard ride, but they cornered well for what they were.
They cornered very well. In 1957, when Chrysler came out with torsion bar front suspension, it really changed the feeling and the handling of a large car.
Yeah.
This particular car has stiffer torsion bars in the front and stiffer leafs in the back. It's about a 40% increase in stiffness in the front torsion bars and about 50% increase in the leafs in the back.
Now, your car is a convertible version of this car.
Yes, that's right.
Yours is black. Show his car here. Beautiful car, except you have the tan interior. I have kind of the cream.
No, I have the same color interior.
Oh, it is the same color?
Yeah, they're both black on tan, yeah.
Now, does the convertible feel like it flexes more than the hardtop?
Yeah, good question. I do feel a little bit of flex occasionally, but frankly, it's mostly when you raise the car up in the back.
Right.
You can notice the frame flex a little bit.
Okay.
In driving, it's pretty stiff.
Let's take people around the car. Now, I'm going to show you what a trunk looks like. You know how modern cars say, oh, you can get a golf bag in the trunk? Well, this one, you can put a golf cart in the trunk. Look at the size of this thing. Hilarious. Full-size spare. There's my Chrysler 300G brochure. This is something we have when we take it to car shows. There you go. You gotta have that. You gotta have that. But the styling of this, I like the 61. I remember the 60 had the big, I call it toilet seat cover, but it was...
It's called a flight sweep deck.
Yeah, with the imprint of the tire.
Yeah, basically it was a wheel cover in sort of a shaped
but just
Continental kit.
This just looks right. You know, it's not overdone. You might think it is, but then you look at it, you go, no, it all works. It all blends. It's a fascinating period. I mean, this is when the space race was just starting, and Kennedy said we're going to go to the moon pretty soon. And, you know, everything looked like the Jetsons and the future and atomic and all of that. And this really looked like the future, didn't it?
Absolutely, with the Astrodome dash.
To restore a car like this today, you're looking at probably $30,000 worth of chrome.
Yeah.
Easy.
Yeah,
Easy
you would.
30.
Although this car does have less chrome on it than a lot of contemporary cars of its time.
Right.
One of the trademark styling themes of the 300 was it had less chrome on it than contemporary cars, even other Chryslers. The only stripe on the side is, of course, the stainless steel with the 300 emblem in it.
And these had, what, a 126-inch wheelbase? Is that what it was?
Yes, 126-inch wheelbase, and the length is about 229 inches.
Right.
Yeah.
And what does it weigh?
It weighs about 4,200 pounds, give or take, with the equipment you have on it.
It's still about 100 pounds less than a Hellcat.
Interesting.
Hellcat with all the modern door guard.
I didn't know Hellcat was that heavy.
375 horsepower. This moves out pretty well.
Yes.
I mean, they're big, but those doors are hollow. You know, modern cars have the big, heavy steel beam and all that.
You don't have
stuff.
airbags in it.
Yeah,
the side guard door beams are not
This just looks safe, but it isn't. And the cars had the wire wheels and 15-inch wheels. Most were still 14 about this time, weren't they?
Well, it's kind of interesting because the first 55 Chrysler 300 had 15-inch wheels, and so did the 56. And then in 57, they dropped to 14-inch wheels because it was kind of a styling thing to lower the car.
Yeah.
Even if you look at the custom cars of the period, they had small diameter wheels on them. So that lasted from 57, 58, 59, and even into 60. If you take a look at the supplemental owner's manual that comes with the car, there's a statement in it that says that they appreciate feedback from 300 owners. Well, one of the feedback was they need to improve the brakes. Yeah. Because the horsepower was not matched to the kind of braking that would really benefit a car.
And they were drum brakes.
Weight. And they're drum brakes. And with 14-inch wheels, you have a smaller drum to work with and smaller shoes. So they went to 15-inch in 61. And although you don't have it on this car, the 15-inch wheel covers have slots in them to facilitate cooling So the braking was better. There were larger brakes in 61 due to the 15-inch tires. Another improvement, too, that might be important to point out is this is the first year for the Alternator on a full-size Chrysler. In fact, other than the 1960 Valiant.
Yeah, Valiant was the first car to have an alternator.
That's right, first American car to have an alternator, and then Chrysler followed up in 61 across all the car lines that they put out.
That's right. Chrysler had a lot of firsts, because I know Mustang, when that came out, that was still a generator.
Still a generator.
Car. It wasn't until September of '64 they started to switch over.
Right.
Well, let's take this thing for a ride, and we'll talk about it more inside the car. Plus, it's got air conditioning.
Hey, is it working?
Today. Of course, it's a Chrysler. Come on, let's go. I mean, it's just a great road trip car.
Yeah, very much, especially with the air.
And you know, the air conditioning works. This is one area where Americans always beat the Europeans: air conditioning and heating.
Yeah.
You know, even when I bought my McLaren F1, it came with an air conditioner. But if you wanted the upgraded good air, it's $25,000 extra. Well, why don't you just give me the good air to start with? Why do I have to pay extra?
Especially in a McLaren.
Yes. Why do you have to pay extra for the? Because it doesn't get that warm in England, so you just have this kind of air conditioning. Yeah, right. You know, the air conditioning was a big deal when this came out.
Oh,
I remember.
Absolutely, it was. Yeah.
I remember it in the mid '60s with the Ford. Air conditioning was about 20% of the price of the car.
Yeah.
I think air conditioning was a $600 or $700 option on a $2,500 car.
Yeah.
So it was really expensive. Not many people had it, and especially in New England, where it's only hot from maybe May until the first week of September.
Yeah.
You know.
You know, the first car with air conditioning was a Packard.
Right.
Right. Do you know that system had no way to turn the compressor on?
No, that was just a refrigeration.
It was just a refrigeration.
Yeah, yeah.
You had to take a belt off the compressor off season.
Yeah. It's amazing to me how many guys restore cars, fix them up, and then just put crappy tires on. I wonder why they slide through stop signs and why the car screeches going on. You know, they get on an exit going 35. The thing is screeching to that.
Yeah, baby.
Goes good.
Yeah. Oh, that sounds good. Yes.
It goes pretty good. Look at that.
Nice. Look at that.
It goes all right. It's got a nice sound.
Oh, sounds good too. No backfiring, no nothing.
No, she runs nice. I put a new stainless steel exhaust system on.
Did your guys do the tune-up?
Yeah, we tuned it up there.
Did you follow the manual step by step on it? Because that's the best way to do it.
Well, actually, just sort of tuned it up, and
boy, you did a good job.
Yeah, she runs good.
Yeah, you can feel when all 8 barrels kick in. One per self. Even your clock is working.
Oh yeah, everything. I like everything to work.
Yeah, I'm that way too. The Bankers Hotrod.
Yeah, the Bankers Hotrod. That's what it was. And you had to be a banker to have one of these. I mean, Mr. Drysdale from the Beverly Hillbillies. Remember, he had the '67 Chrysler Imperial.
Yeah, Imperial.
I have one just like his, same color and everything. I'm not a big Mr. Drysdale fan. It's just it just happens to be the same color. I don't collect Drysdale memorabilia. Right now we're on a nice 2-lane B road, but this car came out really at the height of the American highway system. You know, by 1961, Eisenhower's highway system was almost done, or pretty close to being done, about 3/4 of the way done. The roads were big. There were 4 lanes across. They were wide. They were smooth, and they were fast. And this car lived on the American highway. This is a car you could drive to Las Vegas or anywhere and just take freeways all the way with your foot in it. Come on, I'll show you what I'm talking about. When you blow the doors off the camera cars. So long, guys. Whoa. Goes good. And didn't this have a 3-speed one year?
You mean standard transmission?
They had a 4-speed in 60.
It had, it was a 4-speed option in 1960, the Pono-Moussan,
right,
the French 4-speed.
Right.
And then in 61, they offered a Chrysler-built 3-speed manual.
3-speed manual, that's right, yeah.
Yeah, it was a heavy-duty transmission, but it did not have a synchronized first gear.
Wow.
So it caught a lot of flack from the automotive press as a result of that.
We put new bushings in the front end, so you can see it tracks much nicer now. It doesn't wander at all.
So you went through the whole front end?
Yeah, well, what we needed.
Yeah.
Like, you really can't get in a fight with the other guy because you can't punch him in the face because he's way over there. So that's one thing. But I like to sort of, well, it's not a see-through steering wheel, but it's kind of a clear plastic.
Yeah.
And of course, what do you call this? The
Astrodome, yes.
Astrodome dial. This is your air conditioning here. The thing that's really weird is your turn signals are down here. You see, you move that there, you move that there, that way, that way. Here's your reverse, neutral, drive, second, first gear. Horns right here, as you would expect. And you got a map light here, rear window defroster, dome light, your electric antenna. This is your mirror control, where you can adjust the outside mirror, which nobody had back in the late 50s, early 60s. That was kind of cool. This is just to let floor air in. Your window switches are here. Your tach is down there, which is ridiculous. You got to go, what's my RPM? You got to look all the way down there. That's kind of dopey. And you got a day-night mirror here. Semi-padded deck. I like these. These look like they came off the Titanic, don't they? Those big breathers that they have on ships. But the air conditioning works very well. There's your clock. And of course, you got a glove box here. And I love this panoramic windscreen. This thin A-pillar, not the safest thing if the car rolls over, but boy, it certainly aids visibility. I mean, it's curved glass was really coming into its own at this period, you know, for windshields and stuff. So that's really kind of cool. Just enjoying my 300 air conditioner. It's pretty good for a 50-year-old car. And the
Absolutely.
Blows very cool.
Hang meat in here.
We are hanging meat in here. That's us. I want to thank Bob and the Chrysler 300 Club. You know, as I said, if there's any car you're interested in, whether it's Model Ts, Chrysler, there's a club for it. Contact the club, get online. It's real easy to do now with the internet. You know, you get on Google, find somebody in your area. And you know, car guys love to help other car guys. When I called Bob and told him I bought one of these, he was more excited about it than I was. And he came down here and he showed me all this cool stuff and turned me on to all the literature and all the manuals and all the other stuff, and I couldn't appreciate him more. So if you got a Chrysler 300, he's the guy to talk to. I'll give you his number, not my number. Right. No, but you get what I'm saying. But Bob, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Jay.
Very much.
My pleasure.
And thanks everybody in the Chrysler 300 Club for keeping the legacy of these cars alive. We'll see you guys next week.
Mm-hmm.